As the holiday season approaches, many of us are filled with joy, but the season can also have overwhelming feelings of grief, sadness, and isolation. Today on Return to Eden, we're going to discuss why almost 60% of Americans say that the most wonderful time of the year is anything but. My name is Kendra Hann, and I'm here today again with Jamie Woodle, Integrative Nutrition Health Coach and Master of Science in Health Education. So, Jamie, why do you think that depression is so prevalent during the holiday season?
There are a lot of things that factor into the state of our mental health during the holiday season. For some people, it's social isolation. Sometimes there's grief from loss or divorce. There's also the fact that we tend to have lower vitamin D levels in the winter because it's cold and we want to stay inside. And also holiday stress. When you sprinkle that in there, it's no wonder that mental health can be a real issue this time of year.
Absolutely, especially for those of us who have children and have a lot of responsibilities. A lot of those burdens do tend to fall on the moms of the groups. And I know personally, I can attest, and we've discussed how much of a burden it can be to make sure there's magic during this season for our families.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming.
Jamie, you mentioned social isolation. I find that really interesting because one of the biggest parts of this season is how socially busy it is. There's so many different things that we have to show up for or be a part of, or I guess I should say get to.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that there are a lot of different ways to feel isolated rather than just being physically alone. There's also the feeling of being alone in a crowded room or being unwanted in the space that you're in. And I would even say that sometimes those types of isolating feelings can be even more impacting than just being physically alone.
Yeah.
Feeling alone is such a barrier to joy during this season.
The actual definition of social isolation is unwanted amounts of solitude. So generally everyone wants some bits of solitude here and there, some more than others, but this is actually into the realm of loneliness. It's more solitude than what you really want. So people without close connections of family, friends, people who struggle with a lot of financial stress or unrealistic expectations, even social comparison, these can all make us feel isolated. I have really felt this, a little bit of loneliness as we're coming into the holiday season because my family moved here. We're rather new. This is the first time that we have not lived within driving distance to family. And this will be the first year that we celebrate the holidays without Nana and Papa or Grandma and Grandpa on my side. And it definitely changes some of the anticipation. Some of the traditions will have to be a little bit different.
Yeah, modified in a way. I can absolutely relate to that. As a young girl, my parents divorced when I was quite young, and I was the only child that they shared. And so when my father remarried, it felt a bit like I wasn't as desired in those spaces. And so while I was present and there were family members all around, and some of those family members did make concentrated efforts to let me know that I was welcome in that space, I never quite felt like I really belonged there or was wanted. So I would tend to almost self-inflict loneliness. So I would bring books with me. I would hide out in little corners and read. I can remember one Christmas with my biological mother, I went to, it was actually her boyfriend at the time's family Christmas, and no one had bought me a present, which I was 8. And they didn't know me. It wasn't a malicious thing at all. And they ended up having just like this nameless present that they gave me so that I would have something to open. And I remember it was a scarf and gloves. And yes, the presents aren't the reason for the season, of course, but I was sitting there looking at all of these children with their toys and their families, and it was the first Christmas after my parents had divorced, and I just had this little box with a pair of gloves and a scarf, and it's something that I think about a lot. And so as an adult, I have tried to create a space where no one has to feel that way. And it's deeply important to me, or has been historically, to invite everyone for the holidays. So particularly when it comes to like Thanksgiving and Christmas feasting, because I'm a cook, I love cooking. And it's been a really beautiful way to welcome people into my life that I didn't know before. Sometimes it's people I've never met that come, and also to try out new recipes and, make sure that there's this almost cacophony surrounding my children so that their holiday memories aren't so quiet and lonely as mine were as a young girl. And of course, that leads me into my next point, which is how experiencing a traumatic loss, such as a death or divorce, some kind of fundamental change in your family dynamic, how that impacts your experience throughout the holiday season and what that looks like going forward.
Wow, Kendra, I'm really sorry. What a formative thing to have happen to you throughout your lifetime. And that brings up how this can actually impact your health.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are affecting us on the inside when our mental health is struggling. So, for example, there are a lot of studies that link loneliness to increased rates of depression and anxiety, even sleep problems and stress. These negative feelings that we have actually negatively impact our immune system and leave us more susceptible to coming down with colds and flus. And so oftentimes we think that, maybe I just need to take more vitamin D or vitamin C, or it is actually what's going on up here that is impacting our immune system. And that's something we do not think about this time of year.
Yeah, a lot of the time, if you're feeling sad or lonely or not experiencing as much joy during the holiday season as you feel like you should, you almost feel guilty. I know I can personally attest to that in my season of grief. Those first 2 Christmases after my husband passed away, I felt tremendous guilt because I just didn't want to do those things. I didn't want to put up the tree. I didn't want to make Christmas candy. I wanted to lay in my bed and cry. And as a mother, we just do not get the luxury of falling apart. And so putting those unrealistic expectations on ourselves, no wonder our bodies are going to react to such an increased stress and emotional distress throughout the season.
That's true. In fact, this time of year, people really struggle with health behaviors, especially those who suffer from addictions. This can be a really triggering time of year. So substance abuse goes up, even suicide and addiction tends to go up this time of year, and it's really heartbreaking.
It definitely is heartbreaking. And I am almost 14 years now in recovery from meth addiction. And of course, this was prior to me giving my life to Jesus. It was prior to me becoming a mother. But I can attest that in those first few years of recovery from my addiction, the holidays were one of the most difficult times. And honestly, now looking back on it, I can see where God was right there with his hand on me and protecting me from those urges. But also becoming a mother was such a huge relief in that way. And I think in part because I wasn't alone anymore. It wasn't just about me. It was about creating this life for my children and what they deserved. So finding a focus during the holiday season, something outside of yourself, can be tremendously helpful. And, giving yourself a little bit of grace in the meantime.
Well, we're born with a desire to be touched and loved. As infants, you've heard of children who don't thrive because they don't get that skin to skin or that affection that we so desperately need. So loneliness impacts our will to live. It also increases our risk for cardiovascular disease and our risk for earlier death by up to 50%. We desperately need love and touch. Not just during the holidays.
Yeah, all the time.
But it's just more apparent how we need that during the holidays. You really become aware of how families are spending time together and creating memories. And sometimes we can feel left out in those moments.
Yeah, or like we're missing out on something, or like we're creating a situation in which our families are missing out. We set these completely unrealistic expectations on what the season should be. And like I said before, personally, I can attest to the challenge of that because I was always the super cheesy holiday mom. I wear like ugly Christmas sweaters all season. I make the cookies. I make the candy. We do homemade ornaments for the tree. I was that mom. My birthday's in December, and so a consistent thing for years was that everyone would get me Christmas decorations for my birthday because that's how into the holidays I was. And then my husband passed away. And I was not prepared. Like you know that losing the love of your life is obviously going to be a horrible experience.
Yeah.
But I wasn't prepared for those secondary losses that came. And I have never met a person who was more fun to buy presents for than my husband. He was fascinated with ancient currency.
Okay.
And so shell money is what was used as currency during the time that Jesus was alive. He suspected that I had purchased it for him because he was following it on eBay. And I ended up having to pack it like in a small box that was placed in a larger box. But I have never seen a person light up the way that he lit up when he saw. And I think it was less about getting the present and more about the fact that I had taken the time to know him on such a deep level that I got him exactly the thing that he wanted the most. And so those first couple of Christmases after my husband passed away, I knew that I wasn't going to get that. And my desire to participate in the season was almost non-existent. It was incredibly difficult. And thank God for my husband's family, because they just swooped right in and just loved me through it and helped fill in the gaps. And actually, one of the most beautiful things, something I think about a lot, is that first Christmas, I had taken a lot of time off of work. And so I didn't really have a lot of money. And I have 3 kids, and we had moved. And of course, everything is very expensive, and started a new job. And one of our coworkers approached me and said, there is a family that would like to bless you and help you do Christmas for your children. And I remember just really struggling to even create gift lists, like of what we would want. I literally couldn't think of anything that would bring joy into our life at that time. And so I put random things. I asked the kids, I asked friends what to get, because the only thing I really wanted was not something you could order on Amazon, unfortunately. I remember the day that the gifts were all brought to me, and it was the first real spark that I had, was this incredible blessing from people that I hardly knew. And then Christmas morning, I woke up and it was so difficult because he still wasn't there. Imagine that. And I had to watch our children open their presents. And if it had not been for God moving in these people's lives and calling them to provide us with this blessing of Christmas, my children would have suffered. They would have experienced the loss in a way similar to me. And that was something that was such a relief to me. And so grief during the holiday season for me meant feeling of just detachment and loss. And it was so hard to see everyone around me experiencing all of this joy and togetherness, and to not be able to share that with my person, and not to be able to see my children share that with this man who became their dad that they just adored. And so respecting your grief during this season, leaving room for those negative feelings and being honest about them. Because that was, I think, one of the biggest burdens, is this need to hide, to play my mom character in that moment and not be true to what I was actually feeling. So leaving room, letting people bless you, asking for help when you need it, and just letting yourself be loved in a time when maybe you don't feel as lovable. And I also want to talk about not just the grief of losing a loved one to death, but divorce, which in itself is a death of a kind. It's the death of a life that you thought you were building.
Yeah.
And being estranged from someone who's such a pivotal part of your life can be incredibly burdensome. During the holiday season, we want tradition, we want repetitiveness, and we want to be close to the people that we love, the people that shaped us. So it would not be unusual or unreasonable to experience negative feelings attached to the holidays when you're adjusting to life looking different in a different season. And along those lines of trying to live up to the expectations of the season and what we want it to look like for the people that we love. It's estimated 62% of Americans experience drastic increases in stress and feelings of overwhelm during the holiday season.
Wow.
We're moms.
Yes.
We totally get it. It's our job to create the magic of the season. And I'm going to be honest, it's one of my favorite parts of being a mom, creating this magic. And I'm incredibly grateful for the strength and the love that has been shown to me during my seasons of grief, because here we are 2 years past when I have lost my husband, and I'm starting to feel the joy again. It's not the same as it was before I lost him, and looking forward to giving him presents and being with him during that season. But there are feelings of joyous anticipation and excitement to be able to create these things. But with that excitement comes a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
I mean, you were telling me a story about caramel corn when we were talking about teacher gifts. And
yeah.
It's like there's teachers' gifts, there's holiday parties for school and for family, there's work parties and gift exchanges, and the work is just never ever done when it comes to the holiday season.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stress and a lot of time consumption and a lot of financial stress.
That's true.
You feel, at least I do, I feel a little bit obligated sometimes to buy a gift for my children's teachers, like we talked about.
Yeah.
But now they're at the point where they have 4 to 8 teachers. And so financially, clearly, I can't do that. So now we're having to brainstorm. But that stress is there because we want to show appreciation.
Yeah. You want to love the people who love you. Mm-hmm. But in the holiday season, there's just never enough time to get these things done. So I think it's important to have realistic expectations to kind of level set yourself. The things that you can do and the things that you want to do may not be perfectly aligned all of the time. And that's okay. Forgive yourself. Give yourself some time to experience your own joy during the holiday season and not just provide that joy to others. And then along with unrealistic expectations for the things that we can actually physically do, there are these unrealistic expectations of family dynamics. So maybe you're not estranged from your family, but maybe there are some complicated relationships in there. Maybe you don't share the same political views and someone's very passionate. There can be some really complicated interactions, and we do tend to, have this almost Clark Griswold, that's the first thing that comes to my mind, type of expectation of the holiday. And we all know how that worked out for Clark. Those expectations he had of the family connections and even his, bonus and what he thought that was going to look like. And those things trickle down. They impact every single person involved in the family.
Yeah. Sometimes there are toxic relationships that kind of put you more on edge. So you can't even really enjoy the holiday season because you're tiptoeing around worried you're going to say something wrong or do something wrong and someone's going to get mad or have something bad to say about you. It's funny that you talk about the political thing. That's huge. And I think right now we're the election season and everything. My family, we have Democrats and conservative. And so get-togethers sometimes can get a little heated and it's really difficult. And so you want to be with your family, but there's also that stress that takes away from your joy because of these family dynamics.
Well, and it can take away from genuine interaction if you're constantly walking on eggshells, worrying that you're going to say something wrong or do something wrong, or maybe you didn't do the stuffing the way grandma used to do it and everyone's mad now. So I can absolutely empathize with complicated familial relationships and how that can impact your holiday season, which is, again, why I would do, we called them PJ Thanksgivings was my favorite thing, which is that, the only rules for PJ Thanksgiving at my house were don't dress up, we will make you change, and you don't have to bring anything but yourself. And again, leaving this huge opening for people to be who they are was something that taught me a lot, patience and acceptance and love for others and myself. But I think it was a good lesson for my children too, in offering something more than themselves, offering something to other people rather than just expecting things to be given to them during the holiday season.
Yeah, I like how you didn't expect anyone to bring something because the way our Western civilization has been set up now, our modern society is way over commercialized for the holidays.
I agree.
You're spending a lot of money on treats and gifts, and it can become a real burden. You can lose your joy.
Yeah.
And I love what you were doing. In fact, something that I would recommend to people who are struggling with mental health issues during the holidays, whether it is loneliness or grief, is to volunteer like you did. You had people in your community come over, no expectations other than pajamas.
Yes.
And volunteering is so important for our mental health. It gives us a sense of joy, a sense of accomplishment, like we really did something. And you are doing something, so it's not misguided.
Right.
It's really good for inspiring feelings of gratitude, even. When we lived in South Carolina, every year the community would host this organization called Feed My Starving Children. And it would go on for a whole weekend, and you could sign up to do a shift. And you basically show up, you sit down for an orientation, and you get to hear about the impact that your community had made the previous year. So then you learn how to do the filling of the bags. So we go in and we fill bags with food, and there are different scoops that go into the bag. I think there's soy protein and there's vitamins and minerals and rice. And then you weigh them and you seal them and you try to fill up. They have music playing and you try to fill up these boxes as quickly as possible. And then when you're done, you get to hear more personal stories and you see these children from around the world who were very malnourished and even in the cusp of death. And then you see them, months after this organization came in and provided this food, and these children are now thriving. And that brings such joy and fulfillment to know that I am impacting someone else. It's not just about me and my family and gifts this season.
Yeah.
We are helping others. And so that just shows that volunteering, it made a huge impact on my children, a huge impact.
As someone who knows your children intimately, I will absolutely confirm that the way you have fostered this spirit of generosity in them is just beautiful. And it trickles through everything in their lives. They're so kind and just open all the time. And they're absolute joys to have. I never have a bit of trouble out of either of them. And you can just feel the kindness come off of your children. And it's had a profound impact on my children too. I mean, we all do the best that we can
always.
to raise kids who are going to be good people. Along with volunteering, adding new traditions is another thing you can do. One thing that was hilarious that my husband did that first Christmas that we were dating is he bought each of the kids one of those like single serve, like giant dill pickles for their stocking. Mm-hmm. I never asked him why, and he never explained it. But that was one thing that we established early on in our relationship. And then it was something I think that's brought a lot of comfort to my children since we lost my husband, because they still get their pickle. And so the last two Christmases, they'll, hunt through their stocking. They finally get to the bottom and their pickle's in there. And we all have this beautiful moment of laughter at just the supreme silliness that was Gregory Hann. So that's something, establishing traditions is a great way to take forward steps. And of course, since then, we have continued to build on those familial traditions that we had to begin with.
And these traditions, they can strengthen relationships and create bonding moments that are so important and good to boost mental health. For those who would like to volunteer in your community, there are a lot of ways that you can do that. If you want to look for local soup kitchens or animal shelters, holiday food drives, toy drives, even volunteering at your local senior center. All the things, like they're clearly going to feel a lot of lonesomeness during this time of year, and what joy it would bring them to come by with some cookies or cards or sing a carol.
Yeah, we talked about that when I was a Girl Scout many moons ago. That was a consistent thing we always did, is we would go to the residential facilities in my hometown and we would sing Christmas carols. And then additionally, you can go in, you can paint fingernails, brush hair, just sit and have a conversation with these people that are so often not at the forefront of our minds, and they deserve to be. It's our job to provide for the people who provided for us, and offering them love and belonging, letting them know that you see them, that you remember them, can be tremendously helpful for their feelings of isolation.
And if you're feeling lonely, don't forget to video chat with some family or a friend maybe you're estranged from, or just distance has kept you apart.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we can do now.
If your family is having a gathering and maybe it's too far or too expensive for you to get there, prop up a device, sit there on video chat and share a meal with your family. There are plenty of ways to relieve those feelings of isolation and loneliness during the holiday season. And actually, I read an interesting article that discussed something called the 3 C's that can help with dealing with those negative feelings during the holiday season. This was specifically related to my personal experience with grief and loss. The 3 C's are choose, communicate, and compromise. And with that, I think it really brings a lot of awareness to individual experiences and needs during the holiday season that maybe we let fall by the wayside because of what we should be doing. So with choose, communicate, and compromise is basically a process that just encourages you to be honest. What works for me and makes me feel good during my negative seasons may not be what works for you. And leaving room for everyone to decide what they can and cannot participate in during the holiday season is tremendously helpful. Also, as someone who maybe isn't the best at this sometimes, remember to use the word no. No is a complete sentence, and you don't have to provide explanations for those things. If you can't do something, be honest with yourself about that. Don't overcommit. Don't push yourself into environments that don't support your wellness and your happiness during those seasons just because you think you should.
That's a great way to account for your emotional needs and your mental health for yourself and for others, to give that respect in that room. There's also things we can do for our body, because we are mind and body and spirit, right? For our body, I have, when I've struggled with my mental health, done things like grounding. And if you've never heard of that, it's basically you go outside and you put your feet on the ground, and it is assumed that the influx of free electrons are absorbed into the body through that direct contact of your feet on the ground. And this contact with the earth likely neutralizes oxidative stress throughout the body and thereby reduces chronic and acute inflammation, which in full circle, inflammation can contribute to mental health issues as well.
Yeah, it all works hand in hand. And then you had mentioned low vitamin D. So going out and grounding gives you a great opportunity to get some of that sunshine. And like I said, there's more than one way to accomplish these things. If it's too cold or too dreary out for you to actually go out, sit next to a window, take a break. Just even 10 minutes in the sunshine is something that can have a profound impact on how you're physically feeling, which in turn impacts how you're emotionally feeling as well.
Yeah. And sometimes it helps people who have even seasonal depression to invest in some type of light box that has at least 10,000 lux. And that helps with your mood and boosts vitamin D.
And could be a great idea for a gift if you know somebody that struggles with those kinds of things too. Our Eden's One multivitamin, actually the new formulation, does have a significant amount of not just the vitamin D3, but the K2 that helps with absorption on that. So like I said, there's more than one way to solve these problems, and we're happy to be here to discuss different solutions with you if you need. I want to close with the point that we totally understand that mental health is a deeply individual experience. What works for me may not be what works for you. So it's important to reach out to your friends and family, recognize the signs that a mental health crisis may be imminent, and talk to people. If you or someone you love is experiencing a mental health crisis this season, we encourage you to reach out to local resources, maybe a suicide help hotline, or even in extreme circumstances, calling 911. Talking to a therapist or a family member and being honest with your feelings and perfectly candid about where you are is the best way to get help and to experience the joy that we all deserve to have during the holiday season. Thank you for joining us on Return to Eden. We are always grateful for any topics that you may be interested in hearing Jamie and I discuss, so feel free to send us a message. Thanks again, and we hope you have a blessed day.